going on, guys? Welcome back to Talking About Baseball. Today, I will be ranking every single designated hitter in MLB. Today is the last day before I rank the top 50 players in Major League Baseball currently. Merry Christmas to everyone, as it is Christmas Eve when this video is being uploaded, and I hope you've all loved this series, and thank you guys again for all the support that has been made on this series. But anyway, let's get into it with number 32, and that is Matthew Batten of the Padres. He's not really all that good. He should probably be a bench bat. He's more of just a utility guy. Really, the only reason he's starting on the Padres team is because currently they just really need to sign an extra bat in free agency to play DH or play the field and move someone else to DH, because Matthew Batten is not a guy who I would want to be playing in my lineup, but also only hitting, because he's definitely more of a defensive guy. But how their team is currently built, he is their DH. At number 31, I have Jake Alu of the Nationals. He's actually a pretty solid hitter. He just hasn't really shown it at the major league level yet, and I don't really think he's going to be great in the majors. He's been okay in the minors, and he's pretty much just a big power guy. And I definitely could think that he could have a pretty solid season for the Nationals next year, but I'm not really totally sure. At number 30, I have David Fry of the Guardians. He's also pretty much just another utility guy who's just really mid at hitting. He's their current DH, because I would also say pretty much the entire Guardians offense is just middle of the road. He's another guy who I think can be pretty solid and could have a breakout season next year, but I also don't really think that he will be. At number 29, I have Taylor Trammell of the Mariners. He was moved to the projected DH spot after some of the trades they've made and free agents they've let walk, and I don't really think he's all that great of a DH. He's shown flashes of being a really good hitter for them after they traded for him when he was a top prospect with the Padres, but he has not really proved that he can be a great hitter at the major league level, and that's why he's ranked so low at number 29. At number 28, I have Charlie Blackmon of the Rockies. He's just a really old guy now. The reason he's not playing the field is because he's not terrible defensively, but he's definitely quite below average, and he has a complete noodle arm in right field, which does not really work when you have such a spacious stadium like Coors Field. And I think mainly the only reason that he's still hitting at a slightly productive level is because he's playing at Coors Field, and that's honestly really the only reason I think he's hitting at all anymore, and probably should not be a major leaguer just because he's so old. But the Rockies have nothing to lose because they're so incredibly bad, so you might as well just start him, as he is a legend of the franchise. At number 27, I have Dominic Fletcher of the Diamondbacks. He is the brother of David Fletcher, and I personally think he's going to be a lot better in the future. He's a pretty solid left-handed bat, although he is going to be a rookie next year, and that's pretty much the only reason he's this low. He did get called up last year for some limited playing time, and did look pretty solid for the D-backs, but now there's a lot more pressure on them, and he will probably be heading towards the bottom of the lineup for a pretty solid Diamondbacks team. At number 26, I have the brand new Milwaukee Brewer, Eric Haas. He is currently projected to be their DH after they've made a few moves, and I think that he's not a terrible DH, but he's not really especially a great one. He does bring a lot of power to the table, especially against left-handed pitchers, but he's not really a contact hitter whatsoever. He can play catcher, but he can also play other positions, so currently he's kind of their DH and backup catcher. At number 25, I have the brand new New York Met, just traded from the Brewers, and that is Tyrone Taylor. I'm not really sure if he'll be their DH because he's not really all that great of a hitter, but he was a top prospect with the Brewers in the past, and I think if the Mets are able to develop his swing and develop him as a player more, he could be a really solid hitter. He just has not been very great with the Brewers in the past few years, and that's most likely why they traded him. At number 24, I have Ryan O'Hearn from the Orioles. He's just a complete hitter that can only hit against right-handed pitching. In his career, he's been honestly absolutely terrible with the Royals in the past, but after going to the Orioles last year and they only let him hit against righties, he looked really solid for them in those lineups versus right-handed pitchers. He cannot hit a lefty for the life of him, and that is the main reason he's this low. Fielding doesn't really matter on this list, and it's just how good you are as a hitter, and that's why he is at number 25, because that's why he's at number 24, because he is a pretty solid hitter, just not really all that great. At number 23, I have the rookie for this year, Nolan Schanuel. He did find some playing time last year for the Angels and actually looked pretty good for them as their leadoff hitter by the end of the year. God, that Angels team was rough. But anyway, was a really good contact hitter, and that's pretty much what he's going to be for an Angels team that doesn't look like they're going to be going anywhere next year. I think that Nolan Schanuel is actually going to have a really solid season for them next year, whether he be hitting 1, 2, or where he probably should be hitting in the 6 or 7 hole. But you never know with the Angels, they're kind of crazy. At number 22, I have the Marlin Avisail Garcia. After a breakout season with the Brewers, he was signed to a big contract with the Marlins, and he has not been able to replicate his success. He's actually been pretty bad for the Marlins, and the only reason he's this high is because in the past he's had some really good seasons, and I think he could go back to that form. And the Marlins are going to really need him to after they lost key hitter Jorge Soler, who will be on this list later. At number 21, I have Giancarlo Stanton of the Yankees. I think that he is just completely falling off of a cliff at this point. Last year, he looked like absolute garbage for the Yankees. They were also a very underperforming team. And even though now they have added another star in the lineup in Juan Soto, I don't think Giancarlo Stanton is going to be able to do that good. I think he could still hit 30 home runs again, but I don't really see his batting average going anywhere above even 240 next year because he's just really winding down too fast. Beginning the top 20, I have Christian Encarnacion Strand. He got called up at a similar time to Nolan Schanuel with about a month or two left to the season, and he looked amazing for the Reds. His power was absolutely outstanding, and while the contact definitely still needs a little bit of work, he's another big star on this Reds team that, like I've mentioned in a lot of these videos, is extremely young, and I'm really excited to see what they can do next year, as I think they will be winning the NL Central. And Christian Encarnacion Strand, if he was able to keep up or even replicate closely to what he did in the last few months last year, that he will have a great season in 2024. At number 19, I have Luke Raley after he broke out with the Rays. He was traded from the Rays to the Dodgers, two teams that are always replicating bad players, and the Dodgers couldn't do it, but the Rays definitely could. He's another guy who can only hit right-handed pitching, but he hits right-handed pitching very good. He had a really interesting hit against the Giants last year where it kind of trickled along the wall, and it was really weird. You probably just saw that, but anyway, he just was absolutely mashing baseballs last year. He was a really big part of an offense of the Rays team that almost won 100 games last year and could do the same again this year. At number 18, I have Ezekiel Duran of the Rangers. He was absolutely on fire to start the season, and so were the Texas Rangers, who obviously eventually won the World Series. But by the end of the year, he had completely fallen off a cliff and was terrible at the end of the season after pitchers began to figure him out more. And by the very end of the season, when they were making their playoff push and eventually won the World Series, he got very few at-bats at that time because they just had a completely built lineup, and unfortunately he was not part of it by the end of the year. But if he's able to take his first half and put it into a full season, he will be a really solid player, as last year he was almost voted into an all-star position. At number 14, I have the recently signed back Pirate Andrew McCutchen. He looked pretty solid last year before a big Achilles injury ended his year. He will be back to play immediately next year, and even though he is older, he's mentioned that he doesn't want to go anywhere else except for Pittsburgh now. He's still a pretty solid player, even though, like I said, he's extremely old, and the reason he's playing DH is because his defense now is just terrible. His hitting, though, for such an old guy is still pretty productive for a Pirates team that, once again, like other teams' players that I've listed down here, I don't really think they're going anywhere next year. And I think that just having Andrew McCutchen every year now, just kind of having Andrew McCutchen almost every day now is just kind of like the Rockies and Charlie Blackmon. He's just such a legend of the franchise. At number 16, I have Danny Jansen of the Blue Jays. He is currently projected to be their DH, even though he's also technically their backup catcher. He's a really solid hitter, and even though he is a righty, he hits right-handed pitching much better also, but he can also hit left-handed pitching all right. He plays about half the games that the Blue Jays do, and I have this weird feeling, I mentioned this in the right field video, that I have a weird feeling the Phillies are going to do bad next year. I kind of have the same feeling about the Blue Jays. I don't know what it is, but they've been linked to so many free agents, and currently I don't really think they're going to get any of them, and that will be a big blow for them. But anyway, at number 15, I have Wilmer Flores from the Giants. He had one of the best seasons of his career last year, absolutely breaking out and having a career resurgence year. He's more of a utility man, but his fielding wherever you play him is pretty rough, and that's why he's currently projected to be their DH. And I think if you pair him up with some all right hitters on the Giants, he's going to need to have another really good season if he wants to lead them to the playoffs. Because currently, based on how this roster looks, I still don't really think they're going to be all that great of a team next year. At number 14, I have Eloy Jimenez from the White Sox. Everyone's still waiting for him to have the big season that we've always anticipated. Coming onto the scene in 2019, he looked like an absolute star for the White Sox, but since then has kind of just been slightly above average. 14 might even be too high for him, but I have high hopes next year, which is not the same thing I could say about the entire White Sox team, because I have zero hopes for them next year as their team just looks absolutely atrocious right now. At number 13, I have Brent Rooker from the Athletics. He's coming off of his first great season last year where he was an all-star for the Athletics. He just looked great all year long and never really slowed down at all. He was just a really solid hitter for an Athletics team that was absolutely terrible, another team that I have absolutely no hopes for next year. And if Brent Rooker can replicate his success again, I think he will most definitely get traded at the deadline to a contender that needs a bat. At number 12, I have Nolan Gorman from the Cardinals. He's another guy who really only hits righties, but he absolutely crushes them. He didn't really play much at the end of the year, dealing with a lot of injuries, and before those injuries, he kind of started to slow down. But in the first half of the season for a Cardinals team that ended up doing really bad, he looked really solid for them, along with guys like Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt, Wilson Contreras, and other star hitters on that team. He doesn't really need to be an absolute star, but I think he can be a big contributor to a St. Louis team that is trying to do much better next year. At number 11, I have free agent Jorge Soler. He's coming off of one of the best seasons of his career, obviously, except for some seasons when he hit almost 50 home runs with the Royals. He was really good and probably the star of a Marlins offense last year that made the playoffs after Jazz Chisholm wasn't really all that great last year. Soler is going to get pretty solid money in free agency after opting out to, in fact, get more money, and I think a contender will give him a pretty solid contract next year, although he has not gotten one yet, and honestly, I would love a reunion with him and my Chicago Cubs. At number 10, I have Salvador Perez of the Royals. He is technically projected to be their catcher, but I think that their catcher will be Freddie Fermin, and he will end up playing DH. And I think that would work better for the Royals because Salvador Perez is probably still one of their best bats behind Bobby Witt Jr., and he's just really only a hitter now. His defense at catcher has been bad for a while, and they've actually moved him to first base at the end of the season sometimes last year. And I feel like it would just be better for them to just move him to DH and just let him hit because he's still really solid at that and is only 2 years removed from a 50 home run season. At number 9, I have Christopher Morel of the Cubs. This might be too high because he's really only had one great season, but he was called up after a month and a half of the season were already done, and he ended up almost having the Cubs home run He ended up almost having the most home runs on the Cubs last year, just behind Cody Bellinger. It was a really impressive season from him, and he's still very young. And even though he is in a lot of trade talks right now, which I kind of hope he doesn't get traded, he is a really solid player to whatever team he might get traded to. And I would be very happy for them if they are able to get him, and very sad to see him go because he's just an absolutely electric player for my Chicago Cubs. At number 8, I have Kerry Carpenter of the Tigers. He was absolutely amazing to end the season last year with the Tigers. I personally think the Tigers are going to win the AL Central next year and be playoff bound, and Kerry Carpenter and Spencer Torkelson are going to be big parts of that. Carpenter looked absolutely outstanding from July on for the rest of the season and ended up almost hitting 25 home runs despite really only being good for 3 months. I think if he's able to get that second half and form almost all of that into a full season, he will be really solid and a big bat for the Tigers, which I think a lot of people are expecting him to do. At number 7, I have Marcell Ozuna. He's been very on and off for the Braves after getting traded from the Marlins and the Cardinals. With the Marlins, he was one of their best bats, but after they rebuilt, he got traded to the Cardinals and was honestly extremely disappointing. And before the 2020 COVID season, he was traded to the Braves, and he has looked pretty good for them, but also kind of wishy-washy. In 2020, he looked outstanding, and from then on, he honestly looked terrible for the Braves. But this year, when they broke the home run record in MLB history as a team, Marcell Ozuna hit 40 home runs and was a big part of that. That's why he's ranked so high at number 7. And like I said, defense doesn't matter on this list because they're all DHs, and a lot of these guys at the top are very bad at defense. At number 6, I have JD Martinez. He's also a free agent. He had a really solid season for the Dodgers last year. A lot of people thought after leaving the Red Sox he would begin to fall off, as he's definitely getting a lot older, and I do agree with that. But he still had a great season last year, almost becoming an all-star for the Dodgers. He was not quite there, but he was just a really good player for them, and definitely a big loss for their lineup, even though they've added other players that are going to be on this list later. We'll just refer to them as other players. JD Martinez is also another guy who, though he might only get a 1-year deal, is probably going to get pretty solid money in free agency. At number 5, I have Kyle Schwarber of the Phillies. Like I said earlier, I have a feeling that the Phillies just aren't really going to have a great season next year, and I feel like Kyle Schwarber could be one of those players. I think Kyle Schwarber, this year, the batting average is finally really going to hurt him. I think, again, he's going to hit around the 200 area and still hit plenty of home runs, but I don't really think he's going to be in the 45 range like he has in previous years. Probably closer to 35 in my opinion. I do think he's going to start to regress as he's getting older, but I don't think it's really going to be a huge hit for him, and I still think he's going to be pretty solid. At number 4, I have Byron Buxton. He's the absolute epitome of being made of glass and having so many injuries, but when he's not injured, he is a star on the field and easily the Twins' best player. He's been moved out of center field, even though he is one of the best defensive center fielders in the game. He gets injured so much that they moved him to DH, and he continues to get injured so much. He's still one of the best hitters for the Twins, if not, like I said, the best. And I think that if he can just have a full, healthy season, he could easily hit 40 home runs. At number 3, I have the second-year MLB player, and that is Masataka Yoshida. He was doing really good for the Red Sox last year after starting pretty cold. In the summer, he looked really good for them, but by the end of the season, he started regressing again and ended up having a pretty alright season. But next year, I think he's going to be one of the stars of this Red Sox team. And like I said earlier, this list is based on mainly last year and years before that, but also some of it is based on how I think they'll do in the future and mainly next year. And Masataka Yoshida, I think, could easily hit 35 home runs with a 300 average based on how he looked last year in his first year in the majors. At number 2, and this is tough to put him at number 2 just because of how good he is, I have Yordan Alvarez of the Astros. He just absolutely mashes baseballs for them and is an incredible hitter. He pretty much won the 2022 World Series for them with a big home run against the Phillies and is just one of the best pure hitters in baseball. Like I said, he hits absolute tanks for them and is probably their best hitter that they have. But unfortunately, he definitely needs to be behind number 1, and that is Shohei Ohtani of the Dodgers. He just signed a 10-year, $700 million deal. This is who I was referring to when I said other players, but I would not call him an other player. He is currently only a DH, and that is definitely bringing his stock down a little bit overall, but at the DH position, when hitting only matters, it's only gone up. Now that he will not be pitching in 2024, I think his hitting is just going to continue to get even better, and that is almost a concern for the rest of the league because I don't even know how this guy can get better, because even though 2021 was probably his best overall season, he played out of his mind last year and has the best batting average of his career by far, while still also hitting absolute tanks and mashing baseballs. He's even said that once his UCL in his arm heals and he's able to pitch again, he would be open to playing left or right field for the Dodgers, depending on what they would want him to do, which is shocking to me because he has not played the outfield since he first came to the Angels, and he was pretty much fully relegated to DH because they didn't want him playing so many other places. But if Ohtani's open to it, I'm sure they'll let him do it because he's just an absolute animal of a player. He's a unicorn in Major League Baseball, and if he continues the streak that he's on right now, will probably go down as the best Major League Baseball player in history. Anyway, that is the end of my DH rankings. I will see you all tomorrow on Christmas for my top 50 players in baseball right now, and I'll see you then on Talking About Baseball. Bye.